Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. I'm really excited to have everyone here. And we're going to be letting some people in as they come in, but I want to respect everyone's time. So we're going to get started right on time. So welcome to a pandemic of meetings, how to reduce, reconsider, and refine the meetings that you have. I'm so excited that you're all here. We have so much great information to cover, and I'm just so excited to start. I'd love to have you guys put in the chat where you're all from. I'm in New York right now, and I'd love to see where everyone else is. My name is Linda Secondari, and I am a recovering meeting scheduler. I really felt compelled to give this webinar because I have experienced what I believe all of you must be experiencing, meeting overload. I want to let you know that help is here and that I'm going to share some tools with you and approaches and techniques that will help you pare down your meeting schedule. The irony of having a webinar about meetings is not lost on me. I recognize it and I own it. Trust me, you will be grateful that you invested some of this time to learn how to break the cycle of meeting overwhelm. What I've come to realize is that time is a limited resource. Everybody's time is precious. In business, we can hire more people, we can make more money, but the time we have is all that we have. And because it is such a valuable and rare commodity, I really wanted to give this webinar. So what you see in this slide is just a sort of brief view of my career. I've been working for more than 25 years, so obviously my CV is much longer, but I feel like these are the highlights in terms of my life of meeting overwhelm. And when I think back at my time at Oxford University Press, where I managed a staff of 40 plus designers all over the world, I can tell you that I perpetrated a lot of bad meeting scheduling, partially because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. I was a manager and I was supposed to keep on top of my staff and communicate with them. And the best way to do that, I thought, was by scheduling weekly catch-ups and bi-weekly department meetings and all of these communication meetings that I really did with the best intentions at heart. But now in hindsight, I realize probably wasn't the best use of all of our time. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm giving this webinar. So this is the plan for the next hour or so. And by the way, I'd love to know what your motivation is for attending this webinar. So can you please put that in the chat? In this webinar, you're going to learn how to audit the meetings you have to determine if you need them. You'll also learn about alternatives to meetings and what tools and working styles can be employed to replace meetings. And finally, you'll learn how to make a meeting a true meeting of the minds. If you absolutely have to have a meeting, then make the most of it in terms of time and engagement. We've got a lot to cover and I want to dive in. But before I go any further, a little housekeeping. I'm planning on ending this meeting early because that is one of my best practices for meetings. I'm also going to allow some time for questions, obviously, at the end. And I have a lot of content to share, but I'm a fast talker, so with any luck, we'll fit everything in. I'm eager to make this as engaging an experience as possible. So we're going to have some surveys for you throughout the session, and I hope that you'll answer them. I'd like you to use the chat so that we can keep the conversation going, and my assistant Emily will keep me informed about what's going on in the chat. And Emily, I'm wondering if maybe we should mute everybody because there's a little bit of background noise, I think. So this is our first survey designed to let me know who's in the audience. I don't know, I was just unmuted, So I don't know if you guys heard me. I'll do that again. This is our first survey designed to let me know who's in the audience so I can be sure to tailor the info to your needs. So please go ahead and fill out the survey. And while you're doing that, I wanted to share this factoid. This is from a very recent Wall Street Journal article. And the part that really strikes me is that we're spending more than half of our work weeks in meetings, and that is astounding. And that begs the question, to meet or not to meet. But before we get into this section, let's see those survey results.
I think people are just starting to fill it out, so I might want to give a little more time.
Sure, actually, and I see. Okay, I will just keep going and let me know when we have those results, Emily, okay? If I don't ask you. So meetings are an essential aspect of our professional lives. This is a really cute story. When my daughter Stella, who is going to college this fall, when she was 3, so this is a while ago, I overheard her telling her dolls that they were going to have a grown-up party full of all the things that grown-ups like: beer, tools, and meetings. I laughed because it's funny, but clearly Stella had heard her father and I talking about our meetings a lot, and surely something that grown-ups did so often had to be fun. Now, this story, as I said, is more than 15 years old, so this problem isn't new, but I do know that it has gotten worse since the pandemic. With all of us being so overscheduled, how are we supposed to get any work done? Some people try to multitask during meetings. They're checking emails or reading material that's unrelated to the meeting that they're attending, and that is a complete waste of everybody's time.
I've shared the results. Sorry to interrupt you. Shared the results of the poll if you want.
Okay, cool. So that's great. So there is actually a nice mix of business sizes and industries. And so interestingly, yeah, I was going to say something about the third question, what percentage are scheduled by you, but that's also nicely distributed. Okay, so we have a pretty general group. Thank you for doing that, everyone. And I'm sure this content is going to be relevant for everyone. So if you want to get some of your productive hours back, the first thing you should do is evaluate the meetings that you currently have. Start by considering the types of meetings you have scheduled. I have identified 3 types of meetings: informational meetings, decision-making meetings, and collaborative meetings. Let's take a minute to go over each of these individually. You could say that all meetings are information sharing meetings, but what I'm referring to are status meetings, one-on-ones, or update meetings. Those meetings I was talking about earlier that I had repeatedly with my staff when I worked at Oxford. Most of the time, information sharing meetings can be eliminated or their frequency can be reduced. So if you have a weekly catch-up, consider reducing the frequency to bi-weekly or monthly. The reason that this is possible is that that information can be efficiently shared through a report or a dashboard status type tracker or some form of asynchronous communication. When I think back to my time at OUP, I realize how much time I wasted having these weekly one-on-ones. Decision-making meetings are pretty much what they sound like. Meetings where informed participants need to hash out details to arrive at a consensus. And although decision-making meetings definitely benefit from in-person engagement, any preliminary informational exchange can almost always be done asynchronously, and I'll talk more about that later. Collaborative meetings, again, they're exactly what they sound like: a meeting where participants collaborate and develop something. These meetings benefit from real-time engagement from the participants, virtually or in person. But like decision-making meeting, advanced prep work can be done asynchronously to keep the meeting time shorter. Some meetings are a combination of the two or more, but all meetings have at their core one of these intentions. Can you write in the chat which of these meeting types appear most often in your calendar? Now that you know about the 3 types of meetings, you're ready to conduct your meeting audit. A meeting audit is a surefire way to eliminate or reduce the frequency of meetings. Emily, what kind of chat responses have we gotten to the meeting types question?
A bunch. It's a little bit all over, a little bit of each option. So I'm seeing
Lots of
info,
information.
collaborative, informational, all
Yeah.
3.
Yeah, so I think that there are going to be opportunities for all of you to, when you've conducted this meeting audit, to really consider if you need to have those meetings, if you can pare them down or reduce their frequency. Okay, so to conduct a meeting audit, look at the meetings you have scheduled over the course of a month. Once you've done that review, ask the following questions about each meeting. What type of meeting is it? In fact, what I would do is I would just take a piece of paper. I'd, at the top as column headers, I'd list the 3 different meeting types. I'd survey my month of meetings and I'd place each meeting under each proper column. And I think this will be pretty revelatory in terms of seeing how your time is being used. Another question to ask during the audit is, does this meeting have a goal or desired outcome? So now we're going to do another survey question. What percentage of meetings you attend have a clear goal stated with the invite? So now on to step 3. Does moving forward require real-time engagement from all the participants? Is the matter time sensitive? Is the subject matter complex with lots of moving parts? Is the meeting goal worth spending the time and money to have the meeting? If the answer to most of these questions is yes, then by all means, have the meeting. If the answer to most of these questions is no, then consider what alternatives to meetings you might be able to employ. Do we have survey results, Emily?
Yes, it looks like 15% said most, 45% said some, 40% said very few.
Okay, so there are obviously some improvements to be had in terms of stating the intention of the meeting at the time of the invite. I've developed this decision map to help you conduct your meeting audit. I would really encourage all of you to take some time soon to do a thorough meeting audit. Use the decision map to identify the meeting types, then see if the meeting is necessary. The map looks really cute, but it actually does work. My goal in developing this decision map is to help you get you into the frame of mind that you question if a meeting is necessary. Here's a close-up of the map. You'll see the first question is, does this meeting have goals and an agenda? We'll discuss more on this later, but spoiler alert, having goals and an agenda for meetings is one of the best tools to ensuring a successful meeting. There's really so much more to discuss about meeting types and the best way to conduct them, but we need to keep things moving. I just want to mention that if you think this information is useful, I'll be conducting a more in-depth workshop on June 8th to really tease apart this information further and to address meeting pitfalls before they happen. I'll tell you more about that later. I also want to mention that we'll be sending a post-session survey and we'd love your feedback. If you fill out the survey, we would be happy to send you the decision map. You can use it as a screensaver or print it out and post it on your wall to remind you of everything you learned today.
Linda?
Yep.
Becky asked a really good question. She says, how far out should agendas and goals be shared?
For a meeting.
Yeah.
So ideally, when you create the invite, but obviously sometimes that's not necessary. I think the goal of the meeting should be decided upon when you decide you're going to have a meeting. I think that is the first step. So you should be able to describe what the intent of the meeting is in the invite, even if you haven't worked out the whole agenda. And then you just, and I will discuss this a bit more later, but you would just add to the invite, this is the goal of the invite of the meeting, and then I will be sending you the agenda later on, and I'll be talking more about that. So this is a meeting tip, and I think it's a really great one to have a meeting-free day every week that allows for productive work to be done at least one day during the week. And for people in larger companies, I think this is the kind of idea that can be floated to higher ups in an organization as a way to support productivity and creativity. And it really would help in meeting heavy work environments. So we've established that we need to be meeting less for a host of reasons, really. But how can we keep projects moving forward without meetings? How can we accomplish everything that needs to be done, like the communication that takes place during meetings, without having meetings drain our work schedules? Part of the solution might come from asynchronous communication. Asynchronous, what? Before defining asynchronous communication, I'm going to start by defining synchronous communication. Synchronous communication is what we do all the time. It takes place between two or more people. It's a live conversation. This is the kind of communication that happens as we bump into people on the street, order our coffee at Starbucks. That's all synchronous. Alternatively, asynchronous communication is any type of communication where one person provides information and then there's a delay before the recipient takes in that information and provides a response. There are benefits to both kinds of communication, but I think it's safe to say that as a culture that we've leaned heavily on synchronous over asynchronous communication, which results in lots of meetings. Using asynchronous forms of communication is actually genius, especially now that we're working in a more hybrid working culture, where not everyone is in the same location, working at the same time, or even in the same time zones. Meetings, also known as synchronous communication, require everyone to be available and present at the same time. Asynchronous communication allows team members to decide when they are best able to address a type of work. It allows people to take as much time as they need to formulate an opinion or an answer to a question. Asynchronous communication also evens out the in-house bias weighed against remote staff, especially those in different time zones. I really like the point that Javier is making here, that we need to reconsider what work needs to be done in real time versus work that can be done asynchronously. This is a new way of thinking about work. It won't necessarily come naturally to everyone, but it is worth exploring. But how do you implement an asynchronous way of working? We already use many of the tools of asynchronous communication in our regular everyday lives. So it doesn't require learning any new ways of working, which means that it's relatively easy to implement and cost-effective as well. If you'd like to implement asynchronous in your working life, try recording a video. Sometimes it's just easier to show someone how to do it. It's easy to record yourself, your screen, or both. You can create quick videos to explain specific processes or anything really. I've listed a few different apps that do this, but there are more coming on the market all the time. And I really think that video recording is just like such an easy way to communicate ideas. Using a screenshot is a great way to share feedback because a picture really is worth 1,000 words. That's true if you think about it. Instead of sending an email about a specific task or an issue or a change, it's much easier and more helpful to capture a screenshot and clearly mark your annotations and notes. Surveys are a fast way to capture honest, actionable feedback from your team. If you need to get feedback, put a survey out there. There's so many free and easy survey tools available. Direct messaging or chatting is also highly effective. for a quick question or a thought. You can DM or chat with someone via applications like Slack, texting apps, social media platforms like Facebook and Instagram. I think we all know this, but it's worth mentioning. Creating a knowledge base is as easy as sharing a document with information and links on it. Team members can refer to the knowledge base to answer simple questions or to catch up on what they've missed. You always need to be prepared for the unexpected. Issues will always pop up. Creating an emergency communication protocol that will alert team members when urgent matters require immediate attention is a good idea. An emergency protocol can be as easy as flagging a communication or using a code word. If an emergency pops up and you need immediate action from someone, they'll know it because they'll see the flag or the code word, and they'll know that they need to reply immediately. I wonder if any of you are using any other forms of asynchronous communication. If so, please put them in the chat. Hopefully now you've got a clearer view of how asynchronous communication can be employed in your work culture to reduce your dependence on synchronous meetings. I'm sure you can envision tons of applications for asynchronous communication in your everyday. Having asynchronous tools in your toolbox can allow you to keep the work flowing without actually needing to have in real-time conversations. Having time to consider an issue before responding is a gift that rewards the sender and the receiver. Okay, we've got another survey question. Which async tool do you think you can use to reduce the number of meetings? All right. So this is this tip is really a list of the kinds of meetings that can often be done asynchronously. And I would just really like to highlight for everyone the item at the bottom of the list, obviously, because I put a big red box around it. Because I think this is one of the best tips from the survey before. You can see that a lot of people have these collaborative and decision-making meetings. And as I said, they definitely require real-time engagement. It's not something that can be done asynchronously, but they all have a certain element of preparation. And we typically, in a decision-making meeting, we will meet, we'll go over what the issues are, the pros and cons, and then people will state their opinions, disagree, agree, and make a decision. Well, that first half part of it can absolutely be done asynchronously. You can all receive the materials that you need. People can sit, they can think about it. You can do an exchange either via email or chat where everyone talks about their opinions, gets a general sense of where everyone is. People can, diplomatically try to get people to see their opinion. And then when you meet, you've hashed all of that out, and really you're just going to be discussing the key issues where there's disagreement or where there is agreement, whatever, just those key issues. So you've saved so much time. So I just think that it's something that we can't understate. So Emily, do we have the results of that survey? So cool. Interesting that folks feel they can use direct messaging more often. I think that's great. Anything that can save time from that synchronous drain is good. All right. So let's remember that the goal is not to have no meetings, it's to have the right kind of meetings, meetings that are effective and efficient, meetings with the right people invited who are engaged and up to date on the information being discussed, meetings comprised of a diverse audience with varying perspectives and capabilities, who can work together but can also disagree, discuss, change minds, and move forward towards a successful outcome. A good meeting respects the time and resources it's using and makes the most of the time we have. So the question is, what are the steps to having a great meeting? A meeting that is actually a meeting of the minds. This is quite a quote. 4 entire days a month are lost due to ineffective meetings. What makes meetings ineffective? Now, this is going to be tedious because all of you probably already know the answer, but based on the statistics, it bears repeating. Ineffective meetings are meetings that are not well thought out at the onset. I'm going to explain this further in the next slides, but I think just sitting with that thought for a minute. Ineffective meetings are meetings that are not well thought out at the onset. Setting up a meeting can be a knee-jerk reaction. Like I told you, I used to do a lot of that kind of knee-jerking when I worked at Oxford. It actually shouldn't be. A meeting needs to be planned and considered. Just doing that would make your meetings more effective. The idea that by just scheduling a meeting, miraculously, somehow, everyone's going to understand what needs to be said in the meeting, how the meeting needs to progress. That doesn't happen in the real world. We really need to think about it. It's like putting on a production. It's like creating a webinar. You really need to think about how you want to move people through the information and what that final outcome is. So we're going to talk about this more. A good meeting will center on a productive discussion with a clear purpose. Begin planning the meeting with the end of the meeting in mind. Understand your desired outcome so that you can tell your invitees. Envision your invitees and develop a meeting like you're telling them a story. Take them from the beginning to the middle to the end. Make sure the content is relevant to them. What do the invitees offer? Or what do they offer, or what will they learn? This is a good time to determine what information needs to be shared before the meeting so that everyone attending is informed and can make the best use of their time together. Meetings are expensive, so be thoughtful about who you invite. You want to invite the minimum number of people needed to achieve your goal, but you also want a group that brings a diverse and knowledgeable perspective, especially if the purpose of the meeting is decision-making or brainstorming. So this is a really great tool, and Emily's going to put a link in the chat. The Harvard Business Review has this tool, and you fill it out. You list how long the meeting is, how many people are attending, and some other information, and it gives you a general idea of how much that meeting is going to cost. And I think those results are really revelatory in terms of deciding whether you want to invest that kind of money in this meeting or not. So now back to the steps. Step 3, imagine your audience. Think about the specific attendees, or if it's a big group, create personas. The cool kids in the back, the engaged overachievers, the distracted managers. How can you capture their attention and engagement? Also think about, is your meeting comprised of introverts or extroverts? Probably a mixture. Offer opportunities for the introverts to familiarize themselves with the content in advance, and also keep the extroverts from claiming all the airtime during the meeting. In-house versus virtual. To balance the potential for in-house bias, if a group is unevenly split between virtual and in-house attendees, a good rule of thumb is that if there are fewer virtual attendees, it's likely more productive for everyone to go online virtually. Time of day. Again, there can be an in-house bias if people are streaming in from other time zones. The disconnect between the engaged morning attendees and the exhausted afternoon attendees, or anyone attending during non-standard working hours, can affect the meeting performance. So keep this in mind when preparing the agenda, and consider alternating between time slots to even out the burden. Also keep in mind the need for facilitation as the number of attendees increases, because someone has to manage the conversation. So I've been saying this throughout, and it really saves time to provide meetings before the meeting, provide materials before the meeting so that folks can familiarize themselves with the content and the meeting goal can be accomplished in the least amount of time. To get a meeting started right, it's essential to share an agenda beforehand. If you don't have the agenda finalized in time to attach to the invite, be sure to be clear about the intention of the meeting and why the invitee is being invited. Let them know they will receive an agenda and meeting materials in advance and that they should be prepared to familiarize themselves with everything. Be sure to send the agenda at least 2 working days before the meeting. This is a really good tip to make sure that you capture all the open questions and follow-ups. Make an agenda item for the last 5 minutes so that you have time to capture all of that follow-up and any remaining questions. Step 5, a meeting without a record of what transpired and what was agreed is a complete waste of time. I am going to say that again. A meeting without a record of what transpired and what was agreed is a complete waste of time. If one thing stays with you after this webinar, it should be the critical importance of an agenda and minutes. Okay, that's 2 things, but really an agenda and minutes. It's not brain science, but sometimes these very straightforward basics evade us. So again, this is one of the things that almost doesn't need to be said, but apparently it does because folks aren't doing it based on the data. Action items are so critical to progress and getting stuff done. Make sure that action items are captured and that someone is responsible for them. And this is really just as important as capturing the action items. At the subsequent meeting, be sure to review the progress. That's the way to keep things moving. End a meeting on a positive note. Be grateful for the time and effort and try to end a little early so that everyone has a few moments to review their notes before moving on. Attendees remember meetings that end positively more, and they're more apt to follow up. So that brings us to the last survey of the webinar. What percentage of your meetings result in minutes and actions? I seem to have sped through that, so I guess very good. I'm going to answer some questions once we get our survey results. And I do want to mention, though, that if you found this information useful, I will be conducting a more in-depth workshop on June 8th. This is the first time I'm trying out this content for a paid workshop, and I'm charging an introductory rate for this first workshop. Plus, as an attendee of this webinar, I am offering a $50 discount if you register in the next 5 days. I would also love to hear from you and about what you thought about this webinar. I'll be sending a follow-up email and the recording and a survey. And if you fill out the survey, we'll be sending you the decision map PDF and screensaver. So please look for that. Emily, do we have any survey results?
Yeah. Okay, I just shared it. It looks like how many meetings result in minutes and action items? 25% said most.
And wow, 75% of you said very few or some. So let's get that to 100% and be more effective. So I would love to answer some questions. Does anyone have questions? I think we can unmute people if they want to talk, or you can just put stuff in the chat if you have any questions.
Yeah, everybody is invited to unmute themselves if they have a question. And if you have trouble, you can put it in the chat. I'm monitoring that as well. So far, good feedback. Greg is asking us to share the slides as well via email. if we can.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, it's a
We
good
can do
idea.
that. Absolutely.
Elise says in the chat, my concern is about people's attention. Often I think having a meeting is the only way to get someone to focus on the topic at hand.
That's an interesting point, Elise. I'm not sure what to say about that. I do sort of feel like people have to be grown-ups, and if they're not grown up enough to do the work on in their own time, then maybe you should consider why you are working with them. That would probably be my first statement. It also, it does depend on personality types. Extroverts do prefer meetings, and introverts prefer, I'm making very broad general statements, but in those personality profiles, introverts, prefer to be able to have some time to think and then to communicate. But if it's a question of getting people's attention, I think that things like surveys and chats and, screensavers or even videos, all of those might be tools that can elicit a response from those people.
So we have questions are still coming in the chat. Yell says, when you have your very first meeting with someone, do you send an agenda before? I've never seen someone do this with me.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Absolutely. That's what I'm saying.
Okay. Do you have any tips for, this is Amy Dewart. She asks, do you have any tips for managing a very few new member of remote staff and not overwhelming them with meetings, but not leaving them stranded? It's their first roll out of uni.
Yeah. So, I mean, I do think that, as I said, the collaboration, that seems like those would be collaborative meetings. So it may be a question of having shorter meetings rather than fewer meetings. So for instance, if you're training them on a workflow, potentially you can give them all of those documents in advance and then have a shorter meeting where you go over the documents to make sure that they understand the workflow. You could also potentially, when you're sharing those documents, make a video to explain. It might be easier if you're showing them, this is the database and this is how you upload files. You can show that on your screen. You can make a video. You can add, your audio to that, send that to them, and then potentially have a meeting where you go over a number of different topics that you've exchanged information in that asynchronous manner. So maybe you have one 30-minute meeting instead of traditionally you would have had three-hour meetings. That might work.
Tamara is asking a really interesting question. She says, when working with creatives, how do you keep them from getting off subject during a brainstorming meeting?
Well, that's facilitation, and that's actually a different workshop, but I think it's really important at the very beginning of the meeting, a brainstorming meeting, to arrive at what the goal is for that meeting and to keep mapping back to that goal. And if you need to, just set a timer so that every 10-15 minutes, the timer goes off and everyone asks, are we still on target with this goal? Are we still tracking the goal, or have we gone off on a tangent? And you can parking lot those other ideas, because sometimes really great ideas come from those tangents. It's just that it's not relevant to the limited time of that collaboration. So you can have a list of ideas and things that get parking lotted once you've decided you've gone on a tangent.
Elise is asking, what about visuals as part of a meeting? What role do they play in the various types?
Well, I think it depends on the subject matter of a meeting. For instance, if people are meeting to go over some sort of a contract or an agreement, potentially they don't need the visuals. necessarily as much as if you're doing some brainstorming for branding or cover design. So I do think that that is relevant to the topic and also to the audience. You know, my background is in design, so I do tend to lean on visuals as a way of focusing my attention and bringing ideas. But perhaps in other areas, lawyers or doctors, or maybe even, you know, editorial, maybe having slides isn't quite so relevant. Did that answer your question?
I will also mention, as an employee of Linda's, that we have an agenda before every meeting that we look at, and that helps because as creatives, it helps me stay on task, and it's a, you know, it's a good visual, and we don't really forget anything either. So
I do try to walk the walk and talk the talk.
it's a simple visual, but it's effective.
Thanks so much. Are there any other?
So people are providing some really helpful suggestions as well in the chat.
Oh, this is great. Wonderful. We will be capturing the chat, and I think we can provide the chat along with the recording.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to just say thank you then so much. This has been such a great experience, and thank you for your interest. And I really hope that you will consider joining me in June if you found this useful, or recommending it to some of your colleagues who might benefit from learning more. We're really going to deep dive in June. We're going to deep dive into this topic and do a lot of brainstorming. We're going to do some bespoke solutions to different meeting challenges that people will can bring. We're going to talk about accessibility in terms of meetings and inclusivity, how to game plan using different asynchronous tools, and just a whole bunch of stuff. So hopefully you'll consider attending. And I just want to thank you again so much for attending. So thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Okay. Hi, Alan. Elise, thank you so much for coming.
It was awesome, Linda. You did great.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate your being there.
Of course, it was awesome. I'm
Good.
learning too.
Oh, good. Good. I'm glad.
All right, I'll see you later.
Thanks, Linda. It was really nice.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming.
No, this was interesting for me. Thank you. I will try to see if I can join. I'm actually on leave on the 8th of June, but maybe I can attend those 2 hours. Let's see. I'll make it
Oh,
happen.
that would be wonderful. Thank you.